Hi, everyone. I am Jenn Steele. I am the co-founder and CEO of Sound GTM. We are a referrals marketplace. And I'm here to talk to you about getting past the noise. So we're trying to figure out how to find marketing signals without losing our minds or without missing vital clues. And the only way I can really discuss this means that there's going to be some pretty severe geekery ahead. And I have no excuse other than the fact that I am a major geek with a science degree that I can't use because I'm in marketing, or I was before I became a CEO. Okay, so if we're talking about signal and noise, we need to talk about the signal to noise ratio. So what that fundamentally is there's what we want, and this is largely done I've mostly used kind of examples from acoustics, right? So you're talking about clarifying some sort of sound signature or music or whatnot. So the green line on here is the signal, what we want to hear. And the red line on the bottom is the noise. And you can even think of this as the signal to noise ratio would change. So if you were recording in a crowded coffee shop, that red line would be much higher, right? Much closer to the signal. If you're recording in a sound studio, that red line would be much lower. You wouldn't have as much noise. And this is what you do with it, basically. So you filter the signal to remove the noise and get a clearer signal. So this is from Wikipedia as an example of what you would do with sound. So you have the original signal, and you can see it's kind of fuzzy. And then we're going to go with hand waving magic, but through, science and engineering, you figure out what the noise looks like and create a filter. And then you apply it to the signal. And as you can see, it's not fuzzy anymore, right? You have a clear signal. Now, there are some challenges with this. First, you can undercorrect for noise. Again, this is from Wikipedia. So we can see this picture, right? And basically, we're looking at the signal to noise ratio. So for the first one, all the way on the left, that's actually a pretty clear picture. It's got a pretty pretty high signal to noise ratio. And then as we go right, there's more and more and more noise. So once you get all the way over to the right, which is basically a 1-to-1 signal to noise ratio, and the noise is the blue and the signal is the red, you almost can't see it, right? There's so much noise in this picture that you can't even find the signal very easily. Now, on the other hand, you can overcorrect for noise. There are actually many fewer examples of this online, so I decided to do it to myself. So on the left, we can see, right? We see a picture of me, one of those conference floor headshots. And then on the right, I have massively overcorrected for noise. And so no, those aren't like little bugs in my eyebrows. And no, I am not going gray even faster than I actually am. That's actually missing pieces of the picture. Those are basically holes. So I've removed so much noise that apparently was all over my hair and eyebrows. I've removed so much noise that we no longer have a complete picture. And that is what to do with marketing. I'm so glad you asked, or at least I assume that is why you're watching this. So we have lots of sources of marketing signal. We have our customer journey data. We have feedback from sales, feedback from CS, feedback from customers. We have attribution metrics, whether or not you're going to fight about them. We have campaign metrics. We have conversion rates. We have thing after thing after thing. We have tons of marketing signals. And basically, this is feedback that we can act on or react to. And then there's noise. And the sources of noise are customer journey data and feedback from sales and feedback from CS. And yes, you actually get noise from the exact same places that you get signal. And you probably don't think that's funny. But let's keep talking about this. So I want to talk about a couple of real life examples on undercorrecting for noise, right? So noise obfuscates our picture, and then overcorrecting for noise where we have missing pieces of the picture. So I am, of course, going to use our favorite examples, at least as marketers, and these are all mostly CEOs. So step one, CEO hears feedback. I once worked at a place that every time somebody's son had a swim meet, he would come back and try to change our personas because he talked to somebody who was a completely different persona than we were actually targeting about our product and got feedback. Step two, CEO makes a change. You have to change now. Step three, team scrambles, sales goals missed. I have seen this not just with the swim meets. I have seen a CEO change out our packaging every single quarter because we were in enterprise sales and he would visit one or two people per quarter. And there it was. And in both of these cases, that feedback that the CEO is getting is actually noise, but we were forced to act as if it were a signal, right? As if it were like the thing we were trying to hear. On the other hand, let's talk about overcorrecting for noise. In other words, removing so much noise that we can't see the picture anymore. So step one, a bunch of customers churn citing the exact same reason. Step two, the CEO refuses to make a change. That might be because if we had to make a change, we'd have to drop our price point. Or if we had to make a change, he couldn't sell what he wanted to anymore. But unfortunately, without making the change, without listening to the signal and dismissing it as if it's noise, we miss our sales goals, churn sky. And unfortunately, while I have been very hand wavy, very on purpose in order so that you don't have any idea what companies I'm talking about, all three of these are very real examples that I or colleagues of mine have suffered through. Okay, so enough about sob stories, enough about signal to noise ratio and various graphs. And I'll bet that's more sound graphs than you thought you would ever see in a marketing presentation. Let's talk about what to do about this. Okay, so here we want to prevent undercorrection. So the question we're asking is, are we reading the noise as if it's signal? So we need to remove the noise so we can see the signal. So these are all questions that ideally you can sit around and ask yourself, well, maybe your CEO, if you have the right relationship, right? You need to get to the point that you're removing the noise to see the signal. So test the source. Are we getting this from our target ICP and persona? Like, is it that somebody is just like, no, your product should do this instead? But that's an engineer and you're selling to a salesperson. So that makes no sense. Like, that is a completely useless piece of feedback. And that's just noise. Have we heard or seen it from multiple sources? Ideally, people in our ICP or persona, right? Or is it just like, I've actually heard strong product feedback, and it turns out the person just wasn't clicking in the right place. And we wouldn't have been able to tell, except that nobody else has that problem. So are we overreacting to one piece of feedback that may or may not be from somebody who can actually use the product correctly? And alongside that, test the frequency. How many times have we heard this? And then has it been recently increasing? Because sometimes we can, well, overcorrect if it hasn't been recently increasing. But the other piece is like, we're hearing this a lot more often. And it's ever since we rolled out this one thing, or it's ever since we launched this one campaign. Like, okay, well, maybe that is a piece of signal then. But if nothing, if we've done no changes, like, what's going on right now? Is it something our competitor is saying? Is it something we can't react to, right? Remember that we are trying not to overreact to the feedback. And then we test the meaning. What do we think it means? And this is so key because it's so easy to just be like, this means our product is horrible and we can never sell it to a product marketer again. No, it means that, Jim's dad from swimming actually wants to use our product in a way that it was never intended to be used. So it means we're talking to the wrong person. And then, of course, are we doing something to cause this? Because sometimes we get noise, but it's like, but we're not doing anything to cause this. I mean, we just have to keep testing and testing. Like, are we doing something to cause this? Did this suddenly break a button? Like, or is this a marketing problem, right? What does this mean? So, in other words, are we seeing noise and are we pretending it's signal and therefore essentially overreacting to it because we don't have a clear picture? On the other side, and yes, I've done this to you twice now where I have given you the exact same list, but that's because they're the exact same questions or actually very close to them. So in this case, we are trying to prevent overcorrection. So are we dismissing signal as if it's noise? So are we missing something vital because you're completely dismissing them? Um, this one I actually see a little bit more often. It's not as, unfortunately, it doesn't torture you as a marketing person as much as undercorrection, right? When your CEO is changing your packaging, or when your head of marketing is changing your target every quarter, every month, every swim meet, to everything they've ever heard, it's exhausting, right? However, after you've been exhausted by enough undercorrection, then you're going to be more likely to overcorrect, right? After I repositioned my product every quarter 7 times, I never wanted to reposition a product if it seemed anywhere near where we should be going. And that was an equal miss, quite honestly. You need to be open to things actually being signal, even if you think it's noise, even if you're afraid of what it might do to you, to your team, and to what you do. So this one is a little harder to do because if you're a very driven person like me, you just really want to be like, nope, that's noise, let's go. So first is test the source. And this is where the question is the same, right? Is it our ICP or persona that we're hearing this from? But then the next question is, should it be? Are we hearing this from a bunch of people that are engineers instead of product marketers? Because it turns out there's an entire use case for engineers and we're missing a lot of things we could be selling. So should it be our ICP and persona? This actually happened to me not too long ago, and I was getting some complaints about something in my product, and I was telling this to an advisor, and she's like, "Oh, well, what do you think's happening?" And I'm like, "Well, it's this type of customer. They're much smaller than our ICP, our persona that's demand gen and marketing. We're actually talking to founders instead who don't quite understand sales process. It's not founder led." And she's like, "Well, should it be your ICP and persona?" Now, in our case, the answer was no, because we actually need a sales process in order to sell you our product. But maybe in your case, it's yes. And then have we heard and seen it from multiple sources? So this one, unlike undercorrection, right? It's actually the same thing. So in undercorrection, you're probably not hearing or seeing it from multiple sources. If it's overcorrection, you probably are, but maybe you're ignoring it. And then frequency. The more times you've heard it, the less likely it is to be known. And then if it's been recently increasing, this is very similar to the examples that I gave with undercorrection. If it's been recently increasing, then we can go down the whys. Why is this increasing? Oh, we did this. Why did that not go well? Oh, we didn't do training. Why did this happen? Right? We can usually come up with an explanation as to why it's been recently increasing, especially if it's actually signal. And then, of course, test the meaning. What do we think this means? So in the case of the churn example, the overcorrection churn example that I was talking about, the churn was definite feedback. Yes, it was recently increasing, but that actually had more to do with their sales cycle. And what do you think it means? And as I sat down with other marketing folks at the company, I was like, what does this mean? And they're like, well, this persona needs this one feature, and we don't have that one feature. But this other persona over here doesn't need the feature. Like, okay, so we know exactly what this means. It means that until we have this one feature, we've got to actually step back and say, is that our target persona? Are we selling it right? Are we packaging it right? But instead, that CEO is just saying, no, 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 we still have to sell that one thing to that one person. And of course, the same question, is our false? And honestly, the answer is usually yes, especially if it's signal. So are we doing something to cause this? Like, did we run a campaign that brought the wrong people in? Or did we make a product change that's really hurting us now? And if the answer to are we doing something to cause this is yes, that massively increases the chances that it is signal and not noise. In other words, are we seeing signal and pretending it's noise? That's the question that we're really trying to get to. And the other thing is that if you regularly have things coming in, you need to be asking these questions not just once, not just when you're like, what the F is my CEO doing? So some final tips. There's no way you will be perfect. I wish I could tell you that you could be perfect, but then I would have to know too because I've never been perfect in my life. You will definitely overcorrect. Just like I told the story after I repositioned a product 7 times, I was like, I am not hearing anything that will make me reposition my product again. Well, that was definitely an overcorrection because suddenly I went from, oh my gosh, too much noise that we're acting on to I will not hear the noise and therefore I will miss it. And as I was saying, apply the questions and apply them again. Come up with your own questions because, again, not perfect over here. I just have dealt with a lot of signal and noise. And then number three, well, unfortunately, even if, or actually possibly, especially if your CEO is the one who is undercorrecting or overcorrecting, you may still have to react to something that's not actually good signal. So when I talked about those two examples, right? The swim practice undercorrection and the churn overcorrecting for noise. And in both cases, we still had to change our persona, even though it was doing it in response to noise instead of signal. And in the case of the churn, we still had to sell a product that wasn't ready for the right persona. Um, and yes, we obviously fought with the product team to try to get that feature. Dear heavens, get that feature on the roadmap as soon as humanly possible. But in both cases, we had to react to something that wasn't good signal, right? We had a fuzzy picture with too much feedback, and in another case, we just weren't taking the feedback on board. But you know what? Um, Sometimes it's a choice between your job and doing the right thing in the case of signal and noise. And I strongly encourage you that unless you're independently wealthy, and I am not, um, sometimes you have to, as we used to say at Amazon, disagree and commit to not reacting to the right signal. And I wish I had better news there. But now, hopefully, with this presentation, you can go to your CEO and say, hey, here's some questions. Let's test, right? Let's see what we're doing. Like, let's see if maybe you give us this feedback after every swim meet. Let's see if its churn is trying to tell us something. I'm hoping that in this presentation, I've not only given you the toolbox, the tool set that you need to be like, oh, what are we doing? Where's this coming from? How do we test this? How do we actually find the right signal? But then you can use these tips and questions with your team and help them find the right signal as well. Thank you so much. I hope that you enjoyed the geekery and enjoyed the presentation.